Donald Trump will be the president of the United States for the next 4 years. His leadership style is divisive, sparking conversations and concerns worldwide. Today, we'll be exploring what his presidency will mean for climate policy and the green transition. To help us break it down, we have Mattias Goldman, an old friend of ours, also one of Sweden's most influential voices in sustainability, and also Jannica Ilievska-Kramer, Senior Sustainability Analyst. Wherever you are in the world, you have probably different feelings about what just happened. For me personally, I was distressed and thinking very much about the climate. And I wrote about this on LinkedIn when I got an answer back from Mattias Goldman, where he had written an article that actually gave me hope and trust that we can still make it. And this is what we're going to talk about today. What is the situation right now? What will happen? And how can we continue to make progress in this important issue of climate? Let's start with our first conclusion, Mattias. Trump is better prepared, but so is rest of the world. Can you explain what you mean by this?
Well, the first time around when Trump was elected president, myself, I was on my way to the COP climate meeting, the one after the Paris Agreement. And we all expected to wake up to the news that Hillary Clinton would be elected American president. So it came as, and we had sort of a therapy session, I remember, at this breakfast meeting I was at in Paris, because we were all not expecting this to happen at all. This time around, we know better what kind of president Trump is. We realized that there was a chance or a risk, however you see it, that he would be elected. And things such as the EU Commission's plan for the future, the Paris Agreement itself, but also what's done in states like California or cities like New York or companies like General Motors, everybody's much more prepared for what 4 more years of Trump might mean and how to minimize, in terms of climate, minimize the damaging effects it might have.
Still, I'm in US right now. I was here when the election was. It felt like one side was prepared and wanted this, but the other side was really still not prepared for him becoming a president again. Jannica, we were here. How did you feel? You are a citizen of US, and your reaction to this?
Well, this is the second time I have the same reaction, and it's not pleasant from my perspective. And it is equally surprising the second time around. But when I read Mattias' article, just that first point, it rings very true to me. And I do feel that we're very much more prepared. Cities, states have taken steps to put in laws to move climate activism forward, and it's happening, and that cannot be changed, even though he's a president again or not. So absolutely, there feels a sense of relief hearing that and just being reminded that that's the case. But yes, not a very pleasant surprise.
Is the rest of the world really going to make it? I mean, you're also writing in your article, Mattias, that this probably means that we will not reach the target of 1.5. I mean, is there a way forward? Will we make it?
I think it's very important to realize that this is not a question of seeing the glass half full. It's not even half empty. It's a lot worse than that. But it's not, when it comes to climate and environmental sustainability, everything is not lost. That is the point that I need to get through here. But it comes at a very decisive and dangerous moment, because we also see other countries that might, want to follow Trump the way they clearly did not do when he was elected the last time. That could be Russia, China, so forth. But there's also an opportunity, of course, now for countries to step up. And that's what I'm hoping for from the EU perspective, from the Chinese perspective. And since the last time around, economics have gotten a lot better in the sense that there is no point in Trump even trying to save coal anymore. It's beyond savior. The worst fossil fuels simply cannot be saved, and the best renewables, like solar, wind, and geothermal, are gonna win, even if they're easily gonna win a fair fight. But even if there's an uphill battle, a lot of the renewables just make so much sense, so even Trump can't stop them.
You actually had that as one of the points in your article as well, that Trump didn't win on an anti-climate message. And you also mentioned that even Kamala didn't play too much on that. Can you explain a little bit more on that?
But I obviously did not vote in the American elections, but it might be clear to people listening in that I would have supported Harris. She had a fairly radical stance on a lot of climate issues on the outset, but then she realized to get those marginal voters, she had to stop wanting to stop fracking. She had to allow for more drilling for oil, which means that the difference between the Harris that we saw at the end of the campaign and the Trump that we now get is a lot smaller than it was initially. Also, it's important to realize, just like you said, Christina, that Trump was elected basically to deal with migration. Another side of me thinks that's very difficult and challenging, but not the topic of the day. And he was also elected for the household and small business economy. Now, if you compare this to my own home country, Sweden, the government that we have, they were elected on the promise to give cheaper fossil fuels to the people. But Trump doesn't have that kind of detailed promises, and there's many other ways to help household economies that will not be as damaging to the climate and the environment. And remember, by his side, he's now got people like Elon Musk, who clearly are not friends of fossil fuels. He's an erratic weirdo in many senses, but there's also a logic behind the people surrounding Trump, that they want to be energy independent, they want to help households, and part of doing that could simply be to have more solar panels on the roofs and more geothermal and less importation of dangerous fossil fuels.
And I could echo that. It does come down to the economics, right? And being competitive. The U.S. always try to be competitive, and not moving in the direction of investing in sustainable energy. That's going to leave the U.S. behind. So, comparing to the EU now, moving really fast and putting in laws and standards and moving in that direction, that creates the competition that can't be ignored across the Atlantic. And so you'll see, even with the Inflation Reduction Act, there are so many companies, even companies that I work with in my role as a senior sustainability analyst, that they've taken advantage of that. They've invested in that. They've used that, and that's going to be hard. Even though you make a promise to take that away, it's going to be hard to pull back that economics, pull back that investment and those promises, because it is good economics to do that. So as much as you want to say, yeah, we're going to cut back on these climate initiatives, if it's good economics and the companies are happy about it, that's going to be a hard thing to pull back. So I'm really curious to see how that plays out, how much you can promise and how much you can do.
I really concur with you, Yannicka, on that one, because also when you look at where did the it sounds weird, right? Inflation Reductions Act.
Yeah.
If you haven't heard of it in terms of climate, it is the biggest climate investment money in the world ever. It was launched by the Biden administration. That's where, of course, Trump doesn't like it. But most of the money that's been pledged or even put forward already has gone to Republican states. And that also means, aside from all the arguments that you bring up, Yannicka, which are so true, it also means that there's going to be a lot of Republicans saying, well, actually, we do kind of want that money. So Trump is probably going to rename it something else, similar to how he dealt with Obamacare last time around.
Yeah.
But most of that money for the switch is going to be there. And no matter how much he says, drill, baby, drill, that's going to probably be more for geothermal than for coal.
That is promising to hear. You've been talking a little bit about this. You said Europe's competitiveness in the transition can be strengthened as well. How can Trump's presidency create new opportunities for Europe, Matthias?
So for Europe, I'm very disappointed that we might be heading towards a big trade war between the US and China. It's bad for the world economy. It's bad for everyone, but that's the way Trump goes. But of course, if you're not part of that trade war, you have decent relationships with both China and the US, you sort of might stand to win from that. And also, even though I concur with Jannica that the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, will not be removed, part of subsidies for sustainability and renewables might be reduced in the US. And we've seen that in Europe, it's been hard to have a battery factory or production of electric vehicles or so forth in Europe because subsidies and incentives are simply so much bigger in China and in the US. So if they backroll a little bit, it means that it's more of a level playing field. And we've seen, for instance, my home country, Sweden, there's electric aviations. They move the production and the development to the US because they get more money for being there. And I start seeing that a lot of them are now considering to actually not move so much to the US, but do more in Europe to avoid a trade war also.
Right. But then you see things like Europe is doing, right? Let me see if I get this acronym right. The carbon, what is it? Help me out here, Matthias. The carbon adjustment
The
mechanism.
CBAM, yeah,
Um,
carbon
the
border adjustment
CBAM,
mechanism, yeah.
carbon border adjustment mechanism, right? That
Explain that
puts a
to someone who doesn't know what it is.
right. So CBAM really it is a tariff that Europe is putting on certain resources that we're importing, and that's just to kind of level out the playing field for on things that are high carbon emitters, like steel, for example, or fertilizers or cement. Um, so we're already seeing. What I want to say with that is like we're seeing that, but what the effect has been for really for the companies is that they're thinking twice about where are they buying, how are they buying, who are their suppliers going to be, and it's just making companies think more about their supply risks. So
Mm-hmm.
there are mechanisms already in place that have put in place for sustainability reasons. Now, what are the tariffs that Trump's going to put in? What effect is that going to have in the long run? I can't tell, but I'm curious, Matthias, to hear your thoughts on that. Just kind of tariffs effect on sustainability and like resources and how we choose and where we choose to invest in our suppliers.
Yeah, well, I think it's really anyone's guess here in terms of what Trump is going to come up with the tariffs. But clearly, he ran on a message to be tough on China. It's less
Mm.
clear his relationship to Europe. We're less of an obvious competitor, and we could be a friendly, co-developer in terms of much of the sustainability. So we'll see how that plays out. But my big worry here is that between the two superpowers, US and China, there's going to be a trade war. Bad for all, but potentially also
Mm.
has a little bit of an upside.
What kind of upside would you think that would be?
Also, that upside is that if you avoid the trade war and you're good partners with both sides, you stand a better chance of, you know that most of solar, wind, battery, and so forth is not done in Europe, but it's not all lost yet. And maybe this gives us a chance to have a better opportunity to actually produce for the European home market and potentially parts of it for the European market as well. I want to take you up,
Mm.
Christina, on something you brought up a while ago, which I just let pass, but it's itching for all of us, I think, is that when Trump was elected, a lot of people reached out to me and said, you know what, I'm just giving up now. There's no
Mm.
point in trying to combat climate change anymore. Also because it came right after the UNEP gap report, UNDP, with the report which says that there's such a tremendous gap between what we need to achieve and where we're at in terms of meeting the Paris Agreement, the 2-degree target, and so forth. And clearly it's very worrisome. There's gonna be increased emissions with Trump. There's no way around that. So it's gonna be even harder meeting those targets. But what we also have to remember is that there's no point ever in history before or after this pod, before or after Trump, when increased emissions are not bad and reduced emissions are not good. Every single CO2 molecule that is not emitted to the atmosphere is a gain. Every reduction in emissions, every initiative is helpful. We need to keep that perspective, I believe.
Yeah, and I would jump in there, Matthias, because is even if Trump, let's say, he pulls back on a federal level, you do see the effects of of laws in place in different places, like California, right? We have the California climate laws that are coming into
True.
effect in 2026. It has a huge impact on companies throughout the U.S. So I think it may even be the third biggest economy still, right? So the
Yeah.
California laws is having a big effect on American companies. But then you also have the European laws, right?
Yeah.
With if you have a subsidiary or if you're connected to Europe, you're either going to have to report on your emissions for the CSRD, the European directives. Or if you're a supplier of a European company, there's going to be an effect there as well. You're going to be asked to provide your numbers.
Yeah.
So part of me, my initial reaction when Trump wins is oh gosh, what's the effect going to be? But then taking a step back and thinking
Yeah.
about, well, in terms of reporting, in terms of doing the calculations, in terms of meeting those reduction targets, there are other mechanisms in place that really do cover companies worldwide. Australia,
Mm.
Europe, again, California, Asia, there's the Japanese, there's many mechanisms that are still pushing the world in the right
So
direction.
true.
So
But again, if I challenge this, if I may challenge a little bit, if we think about it, I mean, US is still such a big force and important player in all of these conversations. So even though I mean, even though there is like a silver lining to everything we're talking about, like what do companies, countries, how do we need to think and also provide ourselves security, I guess, in order
Mhm.
to be able to continue with this. But I mean, is he able to get out of the agreement, the
Yeah.
COP29, the latest?
Well, first of all, it's so good to have you, Jannica, in the US, not only for the great work you do, but also because you help us understand what we often forget, that US is so federal that a lot of it is done at state level. California and so many other states keep moving forward in the right direction. But also, when it comes to the Paris Agreement, as you know, Trump left, or the US left under Trump the last time around. I believe, and I believe the US will leave again. But also, if most of us
You believe it that
are
he will leave again?
he will leave again. The US will leave again. I'm fairly sure. But if all of us have a great party and there's this one person just destroying the party, we kind of want to tell that person could you just kindly go home instead of just hanging around and ruining it for all of us. And the UN is a peculiar place in the sense that its decisions are taken unanimously. So if one country says no, we don't wanna, it's not gonna happen. And that is why a country like US under Trump might be better to not have within the Paris Agreement. To have on the outside, it's still part of the UN framework on climate. The basics are still there. And when the US left the last time around with Trump, there was this large coalition we're still in, with the states, the cities, the companies, the citizens of the US saying we're still going to push forward the climate agenda, but the Trump administration is not going to be at the negotiations destroying everything for the rest of the world. So given the policies of Trump, I kind of prefer that it's not there.
and also what you're saying here, the cities are so important.
Yeah.
The cities are in themselves some of the biggest emitters, and there are. I was even looking up before the show, and because the company I work for, we work closely with cities to prepare climate action plans and preparing the greenhouse gas, whether it's accounting or verification, but so many cities in the US. I mean, Santa Monica was one of the first cities in the US moving that direction. That was a long time ago. But across the US, there is a movement in the cities to make the cities more inhabitable, make them reduce their emission because people enjoy cities that are sustainable.
Yeah.
It's a more enjoyable place to live. And so there's I can't remember the exact number, and I wish I couldn't top of my head, but one of my colleagues who's very invested in the cities, she said that a large majority of cities in the US have a climate action plan.
Right.
And that's not going to change because Trump comes in on a federal level. they're going to continue moving ahead because it makes sense. It makes sense for their citizens, and
There's
they
all
know
these
that.
great co-benefits. You're so right. I mean, even if you
Hey,
were to not focus on climate, you just focus on clean air or reduced noise
mm,
or increased livability with green spaces and parks. All of this is just going to be helpful for the climate, whether you want it or not. So it's so right.
hmm right, exactly, and that's what citizens are asking for. And a part of me is even thinking with U.S. being so oppositional, right? Even whether you're on the Republican side or the Democratic side, or if you're one of the minority parties, you're still going to want to live in a city that is livable, that meets your needs. And that's what it comes down to, meeting the needs of the citizens. So climate action plans that make sense is still happening. It's moving forward because it makes sense.
Matthias, while you were discussing, your article mentions 6 things. If we would summarize them, the 6, what would you say then?
My sort of basic message would be that there's no point in denying that it is problematic that Trump is going to be the next president of the US from a climate perspective. From other perspectives that I also care about, it might be even more worrying. But here, there is opportunities also, and the more we use these opportunities, the better. The clear message here is that if anyone thought that combating climate change, we can lean back and let somebody else deal with it, is taken care of. Nobody can think that way anymore. And the reaction the last time Trump was around, after the initial surprise, we rolled up our sleeves and we decided to perform better together. And I think this time we're better prepared, and we realized that the urgency of climate change combined with the opportunities, but also the tremendous risks of the new Trump administration really means that we have all got to act together. And I think it's a call to action that cannot be ignored.
On that topic, I wanted to dive into a question of, if you are a company, a city, you feel that you need a map moving forward, top 3 things that they should focus on and get acting on in order to make sure to continue to contribute to a better climate situation. What would you say? Let's start with you, Matthias.
I think first focus on co-benefits. Then there's no denial that particularly on the federal US level, climate is not going to be a top priority. But what you can do for reduce increased independency in the energy sector, better local equality, green jobs, all these things, that's going to matter more. So it's a term of how you adjust your business. Secondly, look for your whole value chains, how much of that can be and should be in areas that are not going to be affected of the very probable trade war between the US and China. And thirdly, keep walking the talk, because even though the Trump administration is not going to be a great believer in combating climate change, the rest of us are. The states, the cities, the citizens, and the rest of the countries around the world. We all need to shape up, and there's tremendous good business to be had there.
Thank you very much. Jannica, what about your top 3?
I approach this very much from a consultant point of view. What do you need to do to prepare? So my immediate thoughts goes to you keep collecting the data. You can't change what you don't measure. So measure your emissions, keep focusing on the reductions, but also one of the things that are going to be very important with Trump or without Trump is the finance side of things. Climate change has an impact, and we will have to understand as companies, as cities, as citizens, what are the risks, what are the opportunities that comes with this change, because it is a change. Because that understanding that and managing that, it's what's going to make you a more sustainable company. And also, whoever is bringing you the finances, who are resourcing your company or investing in your company, they're going to look at that. Are you aware of the risks and opportunities? Because we don't want to lose sight of the opportunities that are coming your way, no matter if Trump is in office or not, because he's not going to be there in 4 years. You're still going to have to think about these things. So those are my 2 things. Keep measuring, keep reducing, and focus on your risks and opportunities.
There you go. Thank you very much. So, Matthias, your article said that both Trump and the world are better prepared. It said that Trump won on issues other than climate. The Paris agreements hold steady, and you said also renewables competing fairly right now. And in the end, you also said that Europe's competitiveness may grow in the future. Is that anything that surprised you, Jannica, when you read the article, or were you feeling like, yes, this is what I see living and working in the U.S.?
I believe Matthias' article is spot on. And for me, it was such a good reminder because it's easy to lose sight, and it's very good to have someone bring that forefront and be clear about it and putting it in language that makes us go, okay, now that initial shock has gone away, all right, let's refocus, because all of those 6 points are very true. And it is, even if I am on a daily basis in the world of climate and sustainability, again, it's easy to lose sight of those very important points. So I just say thank you, Matthias. That helped me the day after the election, brought me back, into a good place. And I'd say just let's keep moving forward, keep the focus on where the focus needs to be.
To the point, Matthias, with your sixth conclusion, that was role models are needed now more than ever. We were mentioning companies, we've been mentioning cities and so on. Is there anything I as a person can do in order to make sure that we move forward? Jannica.
Well, twofold actually. Just like as people, right? Walk the talk. Be conscious about how you use this. Your daily things. We can do them. We know how to do it. Just get doing. But something that Matthias said just kind of sparked in me too. Just another thing is put your money where your mouth is. If you're investing, your investment really matters. So another example, so we've talked about the trickle down effect, talked about the compliance, companies meeting compliance need, but also this move of green investment, it has an effect. Because you have these big portfolio companies and they want their companies to meet certain targets, to have certain policies in place, because they know that if you do, you're actually managing risk and you're also capitalizing an opportunity. And seeing that, we see that a lot as consultants. We have companies come to us, said our portfolio company says we got to do this and that. Put your money in green investment. It works. It puts pressure. And as a consultant in the spot of helping those companies meeting those targets, we see the effect of that. So yeah, if you're investing, if you're putting your pension fund, put it in a green fund. It helps.
It's also going to give you more money back in the end. So it's successful for your wallet as well.
Win-win.
Matthias, what about you?
It's a win-win.
Win-win.
I think the election of Trump, in many ways, sends a very strong message about the power of the voter. When Trump won, it shows that it couldn't have gone another way if the voters of the U.S. had decided otherwise. And we are voters formally once every 4 or 5 years, depending on where you live. But we are voters every day. I used to be a politician myself, and clearly when voters come up to politicians, send them an email, drop them a line, give them a call. We are easy to influence, and we now need to get the message across to our dear elected politicians around the world that we do not want to backtrack on combating climate change. We do that by contacting the politicians, but also by walking the talk ourselves, much aligned with what Jannica said. And there's an important message in the election of Trump in the sense that some people might have thought that combating climate change is going to be taken care of. It's not. It's something that we all need to take care of together. We now clearly see that we need to roll up our sleeves and deal with it on the level of households, on the level of companies, cities, states, countries, and the world united. Last time Trump was elected, in fact, the world united better around combating climate change because we had, if you want, a common, I don't want to say a common enemy, but we had a common cause that became clearer thanks to the election of Trump. And I strongly believe this is happening again, and certainly we can all make sure that it does happen.
It's the counter movement. Yeah,
Yeah, we are the counter movement.
we are.
We are the counter movement. I couldn't have had a better finish than what we just had. We started this conversation about this being more like a therapeutic conversation. Matthias, your article gave us hope, and I hope that we've been able to spread that hope to many people who have been listening as well, because it's all about what we do next. And my brother-in-law, he said it very wisely. Trump is not saying what we should eat for breakfast, so let's make sure that we do the right things moving forward. So it's all about what we do, and that's why we are doing this podcast, The Switch, because we want you to get more knowledge, because knowledgeable citizens, they make better choices, and that is how we together can make the switch moving forward. Thank you, Jannica Ilievska-Kramer and Matthias Goldman, for joining me and giving hope to us all out there about what we can do, how we can be a part of this movement forward.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you, guys. With that said, I am saying goodbye to you. Remember, you can be a part of the switch. You are a part of the switch if you're listening to this. Make sure to share this podcast, to send it to someone who can also be a part of this, and subscribe to us. And in the end, remember to take care of yourself, and if you can, someone else. Thank you very much, guys, and see you back again soon.